Welcome gamers, Critical Blindside here with another Talk and Play. Today we're going to be talking about why games matter, and I'm going to be playing Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. So the titles kind of speak for themselves. Why games matter, I'll be delving into kind of the economy and the necessity of games, and also the personal touches and the satisfaction that it brings gamers like me all around the world. That'll be coming up a little bit later. But first, I kind of want to dive deep into this Castlevania game. What you're going to be watching is kind of the tutorial level, which as far as I can tell, in about 1 hour to 2 hours that I've been playing, is by far the best part. They do something I like to call ability teasing, which they give you pretty much all of your abilities, all maxed out, all top notch, and they let you go crazy with it. They let you beat up huge crazy mechs and all kinds of guards and a crazy kind of double-sworded zealot angel-looking creature, and it's great. You have all kinds of abilities and all kinds of crazy stuff you can do, and then spoilers, it takes it away from you. It does this kind of time forwarding thing to where you can't get to your castle and you're stuck with basic abilities. It's really odd, but I don't know if I like this kind of game mechanic or if I don't. It's kind of cool because it gives you a taste of things to come, and it kind of foreshadows the kind of abilities you can have, but then you're stuck with half the game of crappy abilities, and you have such good ones waiting around the corner. So like I said, I can't decide whether or not this is a good for games kind of a game mechanic, or whether or not this is just kind of teasing you. But the game so far is pretty good. Looks really nice. Some of the textures are a little old, and maybe they kind of rushed it and they didn't have enough time to finish some of the textures, and some of it just kind of looks bad, but overall the game looks pretty good. The controls are pretty crisp, and the platforming is pretty decent. If you've played Uncharted or the new Tomb Raider game, then you've done the platforming mechanics here. They have annoying quick time events, but these are not so annoying just because of the way that they implement them, so that's kind of nice. But the brawling and the beating up of the enemies is very satisfying. It kind of gets mundane, but you have a nice mechanic for gaining your health back, which is this void sword, I think is what it's called. As you hit people with the sword, you gain health. Then he has these kind of gauntlets that he can put on that have flames on them, and you can kind of bash shields away, and it's for getting the defenses of the enemy down. And then you have your trusty whip, which is kind of reminiscent of the old games, but this is more of a melee whip where you can kind of do crazy things and beat up your enemies with it. And it has a kind of a cool red aesthetic to it, which kind of looks nice. And the void sword is white and kind of angelic, which is a nice contrast to the devilish look that he has. And also the gauntlets, which I spoke about earlier, have a kind of a nice flame coming out of them, which flaming hands are always cool looking. And that's another thing, is that the particle effects are pretty good in this game as well, and it kind of adds to every single hit. Whenever you hit somebody, it really feels like you're doing damage. It doesn't feel like they're just sponges and you're just wailing at them. That is one good thing I like about the game. And overall, I mean, I don't know if it's worth the full amount of money that they're charging right now for it. It's not on any kind of sale. It's not discounted at all. It's full price, and I mean, right now, I kind of feel weird about recommending it. I mean, it's okay, but I don't know, so many other games do this kind of thing better. So if you want to beat 'em up, there's plenty of other beat 'em ups that you can get. If you want a platformer, there's way better platformers. It's just this game is trying to do it all, and I just don't think it comes out on top doing everything together. But if you can get it on a sale, especially a substantial sale, if you can get it anywhere near like 50% off, I would definitely recommend it. You can sink some good amount of time into this game. At the end of it, you can kind of feel that you haven't been ripped off or you haven't been cheated with a bad game. So that's what I would recommend. So this 1st of March, Lady Critical and I were celebrating our 8-year anniversary. While we were sitting at dinner, of course, I was thinking about video games for at least half of it, and I got to thinking, as I often do, about more of the philosophical implication of games and the legacy that they leave. And I quickly started thinking about, why is it that games matter? So oftentimes games get compared to other media forms such as cinema or books, and I think that's kind of an unfair comparison, mostly in the fact that games are so new and they're so different than the other two forms. So books came as a result of pretty much that's all they had. So they didn't have any other technology in which to spread information or to convey thought. So not surprisingly, people started writing things down. These kind of evolved into books and magazines and all forms of written entertainment. Then movies come along, which is kind of a natural evolution for books. So many people, when they read a book, they envision the story in their brain, and then movies kind of came as a result of people thinking about books coming to life and having the technology of moving pictures. So books, which kind of always relied on the imagination of the person reading it, was transformed into a medium in which you didn't have to do that anymore. You could go to a movie and watch it and be dazed. And in the beginning of, I would imagine, both books and cinema, they had their rocky starts. They had their critics who didn't think they would actually become anything. They had their visionary studios and visionary directors and writers, and they had everything that they needed to culminate into the powerhouses that they are today. And I don't think there's a critic alive today that doesn't recognize the importance of both cinema and books. Yet most of these critics are the first to jump on video games for not measuring up or not meeting the bar in which movies and books have set. And some proponents of video games would argue that it doesn't matter. Who cares if video games are considered art or are considered on the same level as books or movies? We are our own entity and we don't need to be measured next to them. But I argue that video games are art. And not only are they art, but they also improve the human condition and can bring joy and happiness and fulfillment the same way that books or movies can, which in the end, whenever it culminates, that's all that really matters to the end user, to the person consuming this media. So why do both book and movie critics so fervently jump on the bandwagon of ridiculing video games? Well, I think video games are an easy target. Games are just now starting to develop characters, real characters, to the likes of The Last of Us and BioShock Infinite. And, for video games being out for as long as they have, it kind of took a long time for the emphasis to be on the characters, which I think that was obviously a limitation of the technology of the time, but a compelling character isn't necessarily hinged on cutting-edge graphics. Also, another topic that's easy for critics to criticize is the overall immaturity of about 90% of the games that have ever been released. Video games have to sell to their market. Their market is 15 to 28 to about 31-year-old men, and these men have a certain thing that they, on average, like. So it's easy to pick on games for having tits and gore and all this other childish stuff in it. But I argue on a whole, we don't judge movies by the latest scary movie release or by the latest Adam Sandler comedy either. And if we were to focus on those movies like critics focus on our bad games, it would be just as easy to dismiss the entire catalog of movies as something that's not important or something that needs to grow up as well. So of course it's easy to kind of harp on our bad games and where we need to grow up, but movies are guilty of the same thing as well, and I argue that books are too. But you don't see critics and you don't see people on a whole judging by one or two of these bad apples, except in the video game culture, they do. We are judged by the violent games and the senseless sexualization of women, and granted, it does run a little bit more rampant in video games than it does in movies or books. However, I'm not sure why video games are discounted so quickly whenever movies and books are guilty of the same exact thing. So we could probably dismiss this point altogether. So now that we've gotten past a few of the stereotypes about video games, we can kind of cut into the meat of why video games actually matter. Games are a $20 billion a year industry. They employ tens of thousands of creative developers, programmers, and artists. Video games alone are responsible for some of the biggest media events of the year. Events that range from the latest blockbuster game drops to international competitions from teams all over the world who compete live in front of thousands of people and streamed without any major channel outlet behind them to hundreds of thousands of people. And these events take place multiple times a year across a wide spectrum of game genres. This is not just first-person shooters or real-time strategies or MOBAs. These are many different types of genres, and they still draw in that big of a crowd without any kind of major public channel backing them. From a purely economical standpoint alone, it's clear to see why video games matter. Video games also have a vibrant indie development movement that's pretty much indistinguishable from the independent film movement, which not only diversifies and gives us a wide variety of games we never really would have had, but it also gives smaller development teams an actual playing field in which they can present their product. Like I said, this is exactly what the independent film movement does. So moving on from the pure business and money standpoint of the video game industry, video games play an active role in all kinds of medical applications. Everything from alleviating the symptoms of schizophrenia to helping burn victims cope with the extreme pain of changing their bandages. It's clear to see that video games play a role in our brain. And once we fully understand not only the brain, but the way video games work, then we can harness this power and use it for all kinds of medical applications. Another reason why video games matter, which kind of hit home personally for me, is I used to have kind of a social anxiety, and I still kind of do now. But because of the online communities that I was a part of, it really helped me in my personal life cope with that anxiety. And the genius part about it was, at the time, I didn't realize that this community I was a part of was doing anything for my social anxiety until I look at it retrospectively. I can tell that that was the turning point in my social life. And the only thing I can really attribute it to was the fact that I got comfortable talking and playing with people online, and that translated into me being more comfortable in person. And in the end, I don't think it matters much that video games are on the same level as movies, because at least for me, what matters is that video games give me and socially awkward people like me the courage to conquer our fears and stand tall and realize that with a little bit of help, we can do anything. Once again, guys and girls, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single person that views my videos and likes my videos and subscribes. It really means a lot to me. My channel is coming up on 100 total views, which I know is pathetic, but for me it still makes me smile every single time I get a view. And I hope it stays that way no matter what happens, and I'm sure it will. Blindside out. Thank you guys so much.